Hello, my name is Vladimirova, and I'm joining you from the green chroma key studio at the University of Oulu with a background picture from one of my field works. I'm a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Education, and this June I'm defending my dissertation titled Body as a Response of a Place, Post-Qualitative Inquiry into Outdoor Education. I will talk about it in a minute. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share the main outcomes of my study here with you, because it's mainly intended for the outdoor environmental educators here in Finland and probably beyond. Thank you to the organizers of this amazing conference that brings like-minded people together. I would like to first briefly introduce myself. I worked as a tour guide and a teacher of English in Thailand and a teacher of English in Russia before moving to study education at the master's program in Finland. I continued my path in education, but this time more with an academic orientation, as I was admitted to the graduate school of the University of Oulu, where I was doing my PhD for the past years. During my studies, I've been visiting and also assisting teachers in different outdoor education settings here in the north of Finland, such as nature school, forest preschools, where I've been exploring the relations of young children and forests. Together with a colleague, I've also been teaching a course on the Introduction to Environmental Education. We've been running it for 4 years now. We offer this course in English to the master and exchange students at the University of Oulu. A big part of it is dedicated to outdoor education as an approach to learn about, with nature, and this year we had an outstanding number of pre-service teachers interested to do their final projects in the field of outdoor learning. It's a good sign for the future of outdoor education field, which, despite its very active development, is still quite marginalized, but has great prospects for continuous growth. In my free time, I love walking in the forest and taking photos of small curious details, and I dream of visiting every salt lake in the world. So coming to my study, I conducted research at the intersection of early childhood education and outdoor learning. I didn't have any clear goal or a hypothesis to test to begin with. My only motivation was to join the outdoor education setting and participate, observe the pedagogy, and explore what happens when children meet forests. The pre-existing idea I had is that forest is a living thing and someone humans can build relations with. So coming from this post-humanist tradition where humans cannot be considered as reigning, dominating, the only thinking subjects, I was interested to learn how relations with forests are taken into account in studies outdoors. My fieldwork experience, both in nature school and forest preschool, was very exciting. I got to know amazing teachers, children, and forests who made this study possible. During my visit, I observed and participated in outdoor group activities and walks. I made videos, pictures, interviews, and audio recordings. While data collection appeared traditional, the approach in this study was quite far from conventional qualitative research, because I didn't engage with the qualitative methods of planning, piloting the collection of data, and categorizing data as such. That's why it's called post-qualitative inquiry. The main specifics of post-qualitative inquiry is that it asserts that data has its own agency and can guide the researcher, instead of a researcher being one knowing figure. In other words, all data in this study, videos, images, written text, childhood memories, my personal bodily response while in the forest, participation in the conferences, movements of children in the forest, and movements of the forest denizens, various events, was co-creating this research with me. All in all, almost till the end of my PhD, I was charmed by the kind of education I was immersed into in nature school and forest preschool. Until now, I'm still charmed, at least by those settings where I had a chance to do my fieldwork. But what happened at some point is that I started to question not only what nature is in our common understanding, but also why there is a strong division between outdoor and indoor studies. These questions mainly relate to an idea that nature exists everywhere, including ourselves, both indoors and outdoors. And the only question is how we approach learning about it and with it. Starting from these questions, I move to question the body-place dichotomy, or in other words, why the division between the learner and the learning environment is so evident in both the language we use and also in actions. For example, according to the Finnish National Co-Curriculum for Early Childhood Education and Care, through immersion into the environment, pupils learn to, I quote, enjoy nature and local surroundings. Natural phenomena are observed through the use of different senses. Practice in identifying different plant and animal species strengthens children's knowledge of nature. Nature can also be a place for aesthetic and peaceful experiences. End of quote. Such formulation supports an old Western idea of human separateness from nature, where nature is seen as an object of learning and protection, as a green place for enjoyment, and as a learning environment. It's considered a beautiful and important place and a teacher for developing children physically, cognitively, emotionally. And the child is usually at the center of learning. However, at least at the conceptual level, it does not consider a place as a living thing that is learning from itself, because it's also a process of change and relationality. For example, learning about migrating birds in primary school involves observing birds, making images, videos, discussing where the birds come from, and supporting the obtained knowledge from any internet-based source or a subject book. The observation, photographing, and naming here indicates the presence of an observer, child, and an object of observation, birds. The relationality, however, is not attended to so much. For example, we could explore how the arrival of birds activates their temporary habitat in different ways, how it is implicated in the lives of local human residents, and whether the birds are comfortable or safe with the observations per se. So oftentimes, and if we talk about the context of mainstream adventure environmental education, children are usually at the center of learning, at least in many countries with a developed infrastructure of outdoor education, including Finland. The approaches to learning with nature in the Finnish context include elämyspedagogiikka, or experiential education, and seikkailukasvatus, or adventure education. However, there are so many different approaches to learning with nature, based on different environmental philosophies, including indigenous knowledges. But they haven't really found their way to the prominent system of Finnish outdoor learning. For instance, guided discovery, common worlds pedagogies, place-responsive pedagogy, and others. In my research, with time, I learned about such a thing as place-responsive pedagogy, where we learn to respond to a place. And I see in it a great potential to think more with the place for the purpose of multi-species well-being. In this type of pedagogy, the child is also important, but her cognitive, physical, emotional development is not a goal in itself, but rather an organic outcome, a result of responding to, with the place, and more than human others. Among the main features of place-responsive pedagogy, which is being actively promoted, for example, in Australia and Great Britain, are critical attention to a place, such as rethinking of the dominant discourses of place through history. Who lived here before? Whose land? Whose traditions? Teaching about a place through stories of local indigenous peoples. Thinking with modern human inhabitants of the land, as well as objects. For example, if we learn about a particular species of a fish, we could try and think like a fish by drawing or traveling through its migrating route, thinking together how a hydroelectric dam affects fishes' migration and their potential extinction, and how the extinction might affect the livelihood of local human and non-human animals. All this is seen as a web of relations. Such an approach is not an easy one, as it requires time from a teacher to develop certain relations with a place, first on their own, be reflective and critical of one's own thinking. in the end, the accent on developing a non-anthropocentric relational component with the world. My own contribution in this personal discovery of place-responsive pedagogy, which is not new in any way, is to attend to a less visible realm of children-forest body-place relations through conceptual work. In particular, I used different theories of process and effect and relational ontologies to conceptualize the body of a child, her movement, as a response of a place. Not to a place, as it might still have this conceptual connotation of division, dualism, but of a place, because, as I argue, the body is emerging together with the place in the form of micro-movements invisible to a human eye. In that plane of existence, both the body of a child and a place have not yet materialized, but they are entangled. And if we think in these terms, then what a child does, how she thinks, is basically a product of child-place entanglement. In other words, what children think in a very intimate and subtle manner is what a place thinks. Moreover, where the child meets forest and this encounter is not constrained, or in the language of our education, children given more time, more free play, then it can lead to many interesting creations, novel territories, the production of new sounds, structures, gestures, anything what is possible and not possible to imagine, not yet. Such creativity is potentially good for the world, if we speak in existential terms, because creativity leads to new forms of life, new forms of being and becoming, which means that the world will continue to proliferate and differentiate. What does it mean for the practical work of a teacher? It's a good question. Outdoor environmental education is an important framework that has potential for accommodating new concepts, pedagogies, and forms of ethics that are thoughtful of lives beyond that of a human being. Practically, all ideas I just mentioned might be realized through provocative, post-humanist questioning. For example, where are the borders of our bodies? How is this river producing our bodies and how our bodies producing this river? Can forests think and how is their thinking visible in us learning, moving outdoors? It can also be done through certain creative tasks to account for the potential of creating more to this life. For example, through using bio-art lessons, and in general, art-based approaches should be a great part of outdoor education. Among the main propositions of this thesis is the need to integrate place-responsive pedagogy into outdoor teaching and learning, or the attempt to diversify the system of approaches to learning with nature. I'm not stating that adventure education is bad and let's get rid of it because it's human-centered. No. What I'm saying is that all approaches are valid as long as there is no monopoly in it, and teachers know how to choose an approach depending on the context. For example, sometimes we need survival training for kids, at other times we need to boost their adventurous spirit and curiosity through adventure pedagogy, and at all times we need to care about the world place we live in. And we can use place-responsive pedagogy or a blend of these pedagogies. The best we can do is not to idealize or romanticize a particular approach, be it adventure or place-responsive pedagogy, but rather we can strive for the plurality of approaches, recognizing their value that is aligned with a particular environmental philosophy. It's hard to squeeze years of work into 15 minutes, but I hope I was able to elaborate more on some major outcomes of this work. If you want to know more or just get in contact with me, I'm open to communication as well as collaboration. After my graduation, I plan to continue studying place-responsive pedagogy and how it can be integrated in the context of Finland, and specifically aiming at pre-service teachers' education. Equally, as I plan to continue working with bio-art and integrating the concepts from my thesis into something more tangible and useful in practice. Thank you for your attention.